Hello there, it's Narelle from the Cricut Explore Maker and More Facebook group. Please join me while I create this fall themed card in Cricut Design Space. So here I am on the Design Space canvas, and the first thing I need to do is find my image. Now this image is free for 1 week for all Cricut users as part of the Community Create Challenge. So I type in the image number in the search box and then I press enter, and I'll put that image number in the description box below. So now I click on the image and press add to canvas. So there's my image, and I'm going to move that to the side, and then I'm going to create my card base. So I'm going to select the Shapes panel and I'm going to click on the square shape. Now once that's on my canvas, I need to change the size of the square so that it's the size of my card base. So I need to unlock the dimensions by clicking on that lock icon, and then I'm going to put in the size of 8.5 by 5.5, and that's going to give me a finished size of 4¼ by 5½ inches. Now I like to visualize what my card's going to look like, so I'm changing the color of that rectangle to white. Next, I need to add a score line, so I go back to Shapes, select the score line, and then change the size of that to 5½ inches in height so that it's the same height as my card base. Now I'll select both of those and go up to Align and select Center. Now that it's centered on my card base, all I need to do is go and attach that to the card base to hold its placement. So I go to the bottom of the Layers panel and click Attach. So that's my base card done. Now I'm going to add my next layer. So again, I'm going to go to the Shapes panel and I'm going to add another square. This one's going to be 4 inches by 5¼ inches, and again you have to unlock the dimensions to change those width and height measurements individually. And again, to visualize what my card is going to look like, I'm going to change the color of this one. But instead of using pattern paper or colored cardstock for this layer, I'm going to use pattern fill, which will change it to print then cut. So I'm going to select my rectangle, then go up to the operation menu and select print then cut. Then I click on the palette icon beside that, click on the down arrow and select pattern, and then I can go and find the pattern that I want to use. So I'm going to click on the filter and change that to orange. I'll click on the pattern that I want from there, and then you'll see the layer underneath change to reflect the pattern that you select. So now I want to change this a little bit to get rid of that horizontal line in the pattern. So to do that, I'm going to click on Edit Pattern, and then I have a few different choices. I can use the vertical placement tool and move that up or down. But what's actually going to work better is to use the scale feature. So I'm going to go up to the slider next to the scale measurement, and I'm going to slide that to the right to make the pattern a little bit bigger. And by doing that, it's going to get rid of that horizontal line. Now when I click back onto my canvas, you'll see the result. So now I'm going to work on my focal point image. Now I don't want to use all of the pieces in this image, so I'm going to use some of the features in Design Space to remove them. Now I want to keep this pumpkin here and this leaf here, and I'm going to hide everything else. So I'll start by selecting my image and going up to Ungroup, and then I'm going to click on this green pumpkin and I'm going to hide that in the Layers panel. So I go over to the eye and click on that, and that green pumpkin has now been hidden. Now I don't want this pumpkin here or this leaf here, but if I go and hide that layer, I'm also going to hide this leaf, and I want to actually keep that. So what I'm going to do is, with that selected, I'm going to go down to the bottom of the layers panel and click on contour, and then I'm going to hide the pieces here that I don't want. So I don't want these pieces up here, and in fact the only piece I do want to keep is this leaf here. So what I'm going to do is click hide all contours and then just go back and unhide that leaf. Now what is currently selected, because one contour has to be showing at all times, is this leaf here. So I'm going to go to this one here, I'm going to click on that, which will now show it, and then I can go up to this one here and hide that. And that's a bit quicker than going and clicking on each of these contours individually. So now that I've done that, I'm going to click back on my canvas, and you can see that I've now got that leaf that's there by itself. Now I also don't want this leaf here, so again I'm going to click on that layer, go down to contour, and I'm going to hide that leaf. So in this case I want to keep this pumpkin but get rid of this leaf, so I'm going to click on that one here, and there you can see it's now gone. So I've got 3 stems and I only want this one here. These 2 I'm going to hide using contour again. So I go back to contour, and then I'm going to hide this one and this one. And now there are the 3 pieces that I want to use for my focal point image. So now I'm going to create the white layer that's on top of this card. So I'm going to go back to shapes, and I'm going to add another square and change this to white. And then I'm going to bring that down here on front of my orange layer. Now I'm going to change the size of this one, so I'm going to go up to the top here. I'm going to unlock the proportions because I want to change it to a rectangle, and I'm going to make that rectangle 3 inches by 4 1/4 inches, and that's my white rectangle, and that will be, when I assemble the card, that will be centered on the card. Now I'm going to take this pumpkin here, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to slice this part of the pumpkin out of that white layer. So I'm going to first bring that to the front, because if I try and move that over there now, you can see that it disappears under the white layer. So with that selected, I'm going to go to arrange, bring to front, and now when I bring that over here, it sits on top of the white layer. Now I want this to be a little bit bigger, so I'm going to just move this up here a little bit and then just drag that right hand handle down until I've got it to the size that I think is going to look good on that card. And then I want to center this onto this white rectangle, so I'm going to select that layer there, that's the stem and the pumpkin, and select the white layer. So I hold down the shift button and then click on the white layer, and now I have all those 3 layers selected, and I'm going to select align and center. Now you can see that the stem has gone to the center of the card. That's okay, because I'm going to be adding that to the card by itself anyway. So I can actually click that layer there and move that out of the way. So now that I've got this here, I'm going to select the pumpkin and I'm going to select my white layer. So again, I hold down the shift key on my keyboard and click the white layer. I now have 2 layers selected, and I can go down to the bottom here and click slice. So now that I've done that, I've got some extra pieces here that I need to get rid of. So I'm going to take this piece here. I don't need that anymore. I'll move that away. And I've got this white layer here. So I'm going to move that out of the way. And you can see now I've got my white rectangle, and that pumpkin has been sliced out of it. And then if I take this stem here, and I'll have to bring that back to the front. I bring that here. When I assemble the card, that's actually going to sit on top of that white layer. So now I can get rid of these two pieces here that I don't want. So I'm just going to select both of those. I could hide those if I wanted to, but I'm just going to click delete on my keyboard, and that's going to get rid of those pieces there. So now I'm going to create the scalloped border at the bottom of the card. So I'm going to go to Shapes, and I'm going to scroll down to this section here, and these shapes are all included with the Cricut Access subscription, whereas the ones that are above here are free for anyone to use. So I'll scroll down and I'm going to select this scalloped border here. So I'll click on that and it brings that shape onto my canvas. Now I want to change the rotation of this so that it's horizontal. So I'm going to hover over the corner of the shape, and when I have that double-sided arrow, I'm going to hold down my Shift key on my keyboard, and then I'm going to move that around until I have it at a 90 degrees angle. Now I only want 3 scallops on my design, so I'm going to go up to Shapes, I'm going to add a square, and I'm going to use this square to slice off everything but 3 of the scallops. So I'm going to zoom in a bit so you can see this a little bit better. Now I need to stretch this square so that it covers the rest of this scalloped border. So I'm going to turn off or unlock the proportions, and then I'm just going to grab this arrow here and I'm going to drag that out. Now I want to move this rectangle so that it's covering everything except the first 3 scallops, and then I'm just going to zoom in a little bit more so that I can get a really good view. And then I can just bring this rectangle over, and I think one little more tap and that's about right. So now I'll zoom back out. I'm going to select both of these layers, and then I'm going to use Slice. And now you can see when I move these pieces away, I've got my 3 scallops. So these pieces here I will select and delete. And then I'm going to use this one here and I'm going to stretch it out so that it's the same width as the front of my card. So I'll select my little scalloped border here. I'm going to go up to the lock icon and unlock that. I'm going to change the width to 4.25 inches and I'm going to change the height to 1 inch. So there's my little border there. I'll change that to white so I can see what it's going to look like. And that's then going to sit there at the bottom of my card. Now I'm going to add the text to my little scallop banner here. So I'm going to click on text. Then without clicking off that little text box there, I'm just going to start typing. So my text is going to say, "Let the Gourd Times roll." So there's my text there. And then I need to go and change the font. Now I go up to the font box here and click on the down arrow, and the font that I'm going to use is a Cricut font, and I'm going to click in the search box here for BFC Thankful, press enter, and there's the font that I want, BFC Thankful Bless. So as I said, it's a Cricut font and it has a cutting style and a writing style. Now I want to use a pen with this, so I want to make sure that I find a font that has a writing style, which this one does. So I'm going to click on that one, and there's my text there. So at the moment it's showing that it's a regular style, which means that it's going to be cut, and it also shows you that up there in the operation that this is going to be cut. Now as I said, I want to use a pen with this and I want to write it onto this little banner. So to do that, I need to have my text selected. I'm going to go to the style box, I'm going to select writing, and then I'm going to go up to operation and I'm going to change that to pen. Now I can change the colour of this so that again I can visualise what it's going to look like. So to do that, I go up to this little palette box here, click on that, and then I can go and change that to whatever colour I want my text to be drawn in. And I'm using a purple colour, so I'm just going to go and click something that says purple. And now let's resize this so that it fits onto my little banner. So I'm going to keep the locked this time because I want the proportions to stay the same. So I'll grab my arrow here and I'm going to make that a little bit smaller, and then I'll bring that over here and I'll change that until it's small enough to fit inside that little banner there. So that looks about right. Now I'll just center that, so I'll select both of those by clicking on one, clicking on my scalloped border, and then I'll go align and center. You can see that it's centered it both ways, and I don't really like the way that it's moved it up too high on that, so I'll just select my text, and using the arrow keys on my keyboard, I'm just going to move that down until it's sitting where I think it looks best. So now that I've done that, I'm going to select both of those again, and I need to tell Design Space that I want this text to be drawn onto this scalloped border. So to do that, with both of them selected, I'm going to go down to Attach, and that's going to hold the placement of that text onto that banner. So the final thing that I want to do with this project is create a little row of leaves that's going to go in behind my little banner there. So to do that, I need to duplicate this image. Now there are a few ways to do that. You can select the image and then click the duplicate button, and it will pop a new one up there on the left, and then if I press duplicate again, it will add another one, and I can keep doing that until I have as many as I need. So that's one way to do that. So let me select those and delete them. And here's another way. I can use Control-C for copy and Control-V to paste. So again, I select my image and then Control-C, and each time I press Control-V, I get another copy of that leaf. And one final way to do that is to select the image, hold down the Alt button on your keyboard, and this only works in the desktop app. Hold the Alt key down and then click on top of the image, and it will add a duplicate, but it adds it directly on top of your original. So if I hold the Alt key down and keep clicking, it will keep adding copies right on top of each other. So you can see there are my 4 copies and the original is down there. So if I move those to the side, you can see that I've got my 5 leaves. So now I'm going to use a little bit of manipulation to change the orientation. I'm going to rotate some of them. I'm going to flip them upside down just to have a little bit of a play till I've got these looking how I want them approximately on the card. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll be back. So now that I've got them approximately how I want them, I'm going to move them over on top of my card, and then I'm going to resize them so that they fit in that 4 1/4 space that I've got on the front of my card. So I've changed that to 4.25 inches. Now one's tucked in there behind, so I need to go and bring that one to the front. So I'll select that one by itself and then arrange and bring to front, and there are my 5 leaves there on the front. Now I have a little bit of white space in between, so I want to get rid of that, so I'm just going to adjust the spacing there on those leaves, and then once I've done that, I'm going to select them again and then change that back to 4 1/4 inches wide. So there's my 5 leaves. So now the next thing I want to do is change the colour of these. Now I'm not going to be cutting them out of cardstock. I'm not going to be cutting them out of pattern paper. I'm going to use pattern fill again like I did on the orange layer, and I'm going to do that so that I can print these out at the same time as I print out that other orange layer. I'm going to use a different pattern though this time, so I select them all, I go up to Operation and change Print Then Cut, and then I'm going to click on the palette button and change that to Pattern, go down to Filter, select Orange, because it's another orange pattern that I'm using, and this is the one that I'm going to use this time. So I'll click on that and it changes my leaves to the new pattern. So that's everything done on this card. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and cut all these pieces out, and then I'll come back and I'll assemble it. Okay, so I've got all my pieces here ready to go. And the first thing I want to do is do some inking around some of my pieces to give them a little bit more dimension. Now I'm going to separate the pieces that I don't want to ink, so I'm putting my sentiment to the side, and I'll put my card base to the side as well. And what I've got left here are the pieces that I'm going to ink. Now I've got the little stalk there, which I could have cut out on coloured cardstock in brown or whatever colour, but I decided just to cut that on white, and I'm going to use my ink to colour that when I'm doing the rest of my inking. So as I said, these are the pieces I'm going to ink. I'm going to be using archival ink from Ranger in Vintage Photo and my blending tool. So I'll bring over my Teflon sheet, now inking is a very easy process. I just ink up my blending tool and then ink around the sides. The other reason I like to ink is to hide the white edges of the sides of my printouts. So I just rub the blending tool around the four edges like so, and then I'll continue to build up the ink around the four sides. I'm going to do the same on this piece, but I don't need as much ink on this one, so I'm just going to tap around the edge just like this, just to add a small amount of ink. And of course I'm also going to ink around the leaves. So again, I'll ink around the edge to hide the white and then build up the colour around the edge of each leaf. Now I'm not worried about the stem, as it's not going to be seen at all in the finished card, so it really doesn't matter what happens to that. So I'll continue to build up the ink around the leaf, and then we'll move on to the next step. Now for the stem, I'm just going to take my ink pad and press that down onto that little piece, and then pull that off the stamp pad, and if it doesn't have enough ink, I just grab my blending tool and then I'm just going to press that down on there just to build that up a bit more till I've got it the colour that I want. Now I want to give my leaves a little bit more dimension, so I'm going to use a pen to draw on some veins. I'm just using a fine point grey pen. I don't want black because that will show up too much. Now this happens to be a Cricut Joy pen, but any pen or pencil would work. And I'm just going to roughly draw in some veins. Now I'm definitely not an artist, but provided they look a little bit like veins, I'm happy. So now I'm going to go ahead and assemble the rest of the card. Now what I'm using here is a Scotch ATG gun. You can use that, or you can use double-sided tape, or you can use wet glue, whichever works best for you. And I'm going to use the same thing on this piece here, but I'm also going to use a little bit of wet glue just on those small pieces, just so that they don't lift up off my card. And there's the finished card. I'm sharing the Design Space project link in the description box below. Don't forget, if you're watching this video before Friday the 30th of September, you still have time to enter the challenge over at Cricut Explore Macro Facebook group. You'll find the link in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.